what we're going to do now is we're going to discuss shape language and line of action. So we touched on it a little bit in the gestures portion, and we're going to also apply it to shape language. So let me go ahead and share my screen. Okay, so using line of action, we're going to just discuss shapes and what they communicate to audiences, especially when it comes to character. So nice, we have two contrasting characters here. So let's go ahead and draw in our line of action. So remember, the line of action is what the pose or object feels like, the flow of it or the rhythm of it. So in this, we have a really strong line here and one that's here. And you can see that it's moving in an arc. And then we have a nice one like this as well. And then you have a little bit of flow happening in here. So with that, now that we've figured out line of action, what I want to do is I want to talk about shape language too. So with these two characters, with this dancer here, it feels very, if we were to draw through it, it feels very square. And squares, when we're talking about shape language, they can represent something that's maybe a little bit more solid. They could be rigid. It communicates a lot about the personality of a character. So with this, when I'm glancing at this dancer here, I'm getting a sense of square. It just feels kind of like a rectangle. With this dancer here, because of the line of action that we drew earlier felt like this, I would say that they're a little bit more rounded. They kind of have maybe a bean shape to them. And circles tend to be more where you see a lot of especially if you look at Disney or Pixar, a lot of those protagonists, which is usually the hero of the story or the good guys, are very rounded, which can be come off as comforting. And circles are very organic, so it feels very safe or natural. And triangles, which we don't really have one here, but triangles, a lot of villains or antagonists have triangle shapes because they're very sharp, and just the structure of it being, pointy, and it also feels rigid like a square. Just the shape of it gives a bit of aggression. It's like a little more aggressive. So if we were to use that on what we were just talking about, so we were saying that our hero, the shapes of these guys, so we had kind of a rectangle shape. So let's do our line of action. And then we could fit in our rectangle. And I'm just going to kind of taper it at the bottom to basically complement the waist here. And you could even go through that, and you don't have to do it this way. We want it to feel very organic, especially when we're building our gesture. But let's now go ahead and put this in. Remember, we got to draw through. All right, let's go ahead and do the other hero. We're saying more like a bean shape. So with these two drawn in here, the square is doing a great job complementing this person's specific shape language because it feels solid and they're supporting all the weight of their partner, their dance partner. And with the other dancer, they've got a lot of roundness and just this organic flow or rhythm to them. So I think that these two shape languages work well with these characters. And, you could build on top of these, just like we did with the gestures, and, start to get in a little bit more. And you don't have to just have, it doesn't have to be just the shape here in the body. You know, like there's a cylinder for the neck. And then we kind of have a little bit of a triangle happening down here at the chin. You know, I'm not too worried about that right now. Of course, like the instinct is you get excited about the face because that is what we connect to the most as an audience. But just having this contrast adds so much appeal to your characters. And as mentioned before, at a glance, you can kind of get a sense of who these characters are just based on that shape, because that's what, you know, the shapes communicate different feelings or impressions. So that's just a quick way of approaching that, using gesture and as well as line of action and capturing shapes. Let me bring up one that I've worked on where it's just faces. And this is another fun exercise. So here we have just, you know, these two are the same character. But something fun you can do is you can actually, I'll just turn this up a little bit, go through and just list out 1 through 12 and number the side here and draw some lines, and then just go through and randomly pick different numbers. And using a portrait of someone, you could then go in and try to create interesting shape language relying on these proportions for the number from the numbers. So doing that, so here I did 1, 6, 8, 11, 12. And what I did with that is the top of the head has to start at 1, the bottom of the head has to start at 12. Then for 6, that's where the eye line is. For 8, that's where the nose line is. And for 11, that's where the mouth line is. And with this same portrait, I did another one and kind of changed it up a little bit and did 2, 7, 10, and 12. So starting the head at 2, the eye line at 7, nose at 10, and bottom of the head at 12 just makes for two different characters here, which is kind of fun. And then you can also go in and play with different shapes. So we did a little vampire exercise here, and just using a shape, this shape here, and then on this one using just this shape, you'd be surprised at what you could do with characters and how different it communicates to you. And these are just these ones up here in the upper right are just some fun ones done from different pictures found online. And you can also use, you know, pencil and paper to do this in person and try to capture different characters and that way. So shape language is really important because it, again, at a glance, communicates who this character is and can already add a narrative just without any exposition, just through visuals. You can use gesture to help build the architecture and then use shape language to define the personality and add more appeal to your drawing. Don't forget to make sure to capture that line of action so then you can get a flow and rhythm to your drawing and still have appeal and a great architecture to start from. So now that you know a little bit about shape language and how it applies to characters and animation, you can begin to practice this on your own. And I'm going to give you an exercise I think will be really helpful. But first, let's take a look at an example of some characters that I quickly created and talk about their shape language. So I will share my screen. So here I have characters that I just made up for a fun exercise on how to do some storyboarding. So we have our hero. The past 2 is our antagonist, the husband and wife that this character is coming to rescue from the past. So if we were going to break down their shape language, one thing is that our hero here, and you know, it's not always the case, it doesn't always have to be this way, but She does have some round design to her. So she's got a very circular face, and then she's kind of got a bean-shaped body, and everything feels very round and very comforting. With our husband over here, who is someone who isn't really a bad person, but he's really aggressive in the story. So because he's freaking out about the pest. So he's got a little bit more of a triangle face. Not totally, but it feels sharper. And he does have a little bit of roundness here, but more cut in here. And still like kind of a square shoulder to give like more seriousness to the design. And then with the wife, she's not really anything bad. You know, she does have a little bit more point than our protagonist, but she's still rounded too. But what's great about using this shape language is that if we were to fill these in, so let's see if we can do that. So we're just looking to capture the silhouette. You can see that she has a very specific silhouette. So at a glance, you get an idea, okay, I know who this is. And then here, he has a very different silhouette than she does. And it's very important to be able to break up the shape language. You don't want all the characters to have the same shape language or it gets really boring. They don't really have any identifiable features. You know, think of Mickey Mouse, like at just the ears alone, you can recognize who that character is. And you can tell the difference between him and Donald Duck just by looking at their silhouette. You won't even need detail to see that there's a difference. And shape language does that. It helps define the characters a little clearer. And also, you know, of course, breaking down shapes and understanding how those forms can build a figure. So let's go ahead and we'll turn that off for a second. And you can see that these characters have completely different silhouettes from each other. Didn't fill in her hair, but you still get the idea. Just do that. So you can see much, you know, different shapes. So at a glance that you can tell that these characters, they do still in style feel like they belong in the same universe, but they have different shape language. So what I would like you to do is I would like you to create a few pages of shape. So I did an example here. So what I did is I started first with triangles. So for you, I would say do a page of triangles, a page of circles, and a page of squares. And then try to build characters on top of that, which is what you saw here. So I got a bunch of different characters, got like a gnome, a mouse, a cat, businessman, a dog, kind of like doughy-eyed person, you know, build characters using these shapes and do that for all the shapes. Don't be afraid to make different sizes of things, big triangles, small triangles, just like you see here. And you could do this on paper or you can do this digitally. It's up to you. Don't forget to start with a base. So you can see here, I didn't go in with perfect drawings. I went in first and gestured it out like we've talked about in this. And then after that, then I built the characters on top of that. I use those under drawings to refine it a little bit more. So make sure that you are building that gesture, putting in that line of action, but using shape to have fun and define these characters and play with it. Think about the personalities. It doesn't have to be just people. As you saw, you can do animals too. So best of luck. I think you'll be excited with your results. Feel free to apply this to your portfolio. It's a great way to show your interest and that you're thinking about these things, especially in an industry like animation. So have fun. That's the most important thing, and see you later.